The shrill ring of a phone shattered the silence of the night. Mark Henderson bolted upright in bed, his heart hammering in his chest. The room was cloaked in darkness, save for a thin streak of streetlight sneaking through the blinds and cutting a faint line across the wall. He glanced at the clock. 2:17 a.m. Who the hell would call at this hour? He fumbled across the nightstand, his fingers brushing against his phone. The screen glowed with an unfamiliar number, no area code, just a sterile sequence of digits. He hesitated for a moment, then swiped to answer. Hello. His voice was hoarse, weighed down by sleep and irritation. The reply froze him in place. It wasn't a man's voice. It wasn't a woman's voice. It was something in between, drained of breath, drained of humanity, flat, metallic, like a machine that had learned how to speak. Mark Henderson, we need a rescue diver. Experienced. Mark blinked, suddenly wide awake. He sat on the edge of his bed, one hand gripping the phone tighter. What? Who is this? How do you know my name? Greenbrier Valley. Coordinates 37 degrees, 55 minutes, 30 seconds north, 80 degrees, 19 minutes, 15 seconds west. Geological event. Prepare in 12 hours. Mark's brow furrowed. Greenbrier Valley? That was mountains, rivers, forests, not exactly diving country. And a geological event. What the hell did that mean? He laughed bitterly. You've got the wrong guy. I'm a sea diver, not a... The voice cut him off. Colder than before. Belize. 2016. The accident. Do you remember? Mark's stomach dropped. His throat went dry. The Belize accident was buried deep in his past. A failed dive he had never spoken of. The kind of classified report that ended up in locked cabinets under red stamps and dust. Only he knew the full truth of that day. Only he carried the guilt of the man who had never come back up with him. How could they possibly know? Who are you? He whispered. But the line went dead. A sharp, final beep sliced through his ear, and then silence. He sat there, staring at the blank screen, his own reflection staring back in the glass. His skin crawled. A joke couldn't explain what had just happened. A prank caller couldn't dredge up ghosts from Belize. Someone knew, someone had been watching him. For a long moment, Mark remained frozen. Then, slowly, muscle, memory took over. The instincts of a man trained for emergencies, for moments when hesitation could mean death, awakened inside him. He flicked on his desk lamp, bathing the room in a dull, amber glow. The light fell on a pile of dust-covered gear in the corner, a dry suit, regulators, air tanks, equipment he hadn't touched in years. His hand hovered above them, brushing over the cold steel of a tank. The weight of memory pressed against him. He wanted to ignore it, to laugh it off, crawl back into bed, and let sleep erase the unease. But the voice had said Belize. And if they knew that secret, what else did they know? By dawn, his mind was made up. He packed his gear, loaded it into the back of his pickup, and started the engine. The highway stretched out before him, a ribbon of black swallowed by clouds. No stars, no moon, just the hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional sweep of wind rattling against the cab. Each mile carried him further from the safety of home, deeper into the unknown. And as the darkness pressed closer around him, one thought kept circling in his mind, sharp as a knife. If they knew about Belize, what else were they hiding from him? Chapter 2. The Gathering. The drive into Greenbrier Valley felt like slipping into another world. By the time Mark reached the coordinates, the dawn sky had curdled into a sheet of iron grey heavy with storm clouds. The road twisted through forests, the trees skeletal and black against the faint light of morning. For miles, there was nothing but silence and the occasional hiss of wind through the branches. Then, suddenly, the wilderness ended. The trees opened up to reveal a sprawling flood of light and motion. Towers of flood lamps bathed the valley floor in blinding white. Trucks, jeeps, and unmarked vans clogged the dirt roads, their tires chewing deep ruts into the mud. Machinery roared, pumps hummed, shouts cut through the air. Mark slowed his truck to a crawl, eyes scanning the scene in disbelief. It looked less like a geological survey and more like a war zone. Logos flashed past him in the chaos. USGSNOAAEPA, USACE. Even the West Virginia Department of Natural Resources was here, but mixed among them were vehicles with no insignia, their plates covered in grime, their crews dressed in plain gray. One catering van rolled by, Greenbrier Catering Co. But Mark didn't need to look twice to know it was camouflage. The smell hit him next. A foul cocktail of diesel, churned mud, and something else. Something metallic, rotting. Mark parked on the edge of the encampment and hauled his gear from the back. No one greeted him. No one explained anything. Officials and contractors hurried past, their eyes fixed elsewhere, their lips tight. It was as though he wasn't even there. A folding table stood nearby, manned by a single officer with a clipboard. Without ceremony, Mark signed his name. Mark Henderson, rescue diver. The officer didn't look at him, didn't speak, just nodded once and waved him on. Mark. The voice snapped him around, and for the first time that morning, his pulse eased. A man with a graying beard and kind eyes was making his way toward him, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Garrett. Mark almost laughed, shaking his head. Garrett, you got dragged into this too. Anonymous call. Middle of the night, Garrett said, his tone gruff but edged with unease. Thought it was a prank. Guess not. Before Mark could reply, another figure approached. Nora. She was already suited in her dry gear, tightening a valve on her air tank with methodical precision. Her dark hair was tied back, her sharp eyes cutting across the chaos like twin blades. You too? Mark asked. She didn't look up. Same call, same threat, and I don't like any of it. Her tone was clipped, icy. No briefing. No plan. We're supposed to dive blind in a drained mountain lake. That's not rescue work. That's suicide. Mark exchanged a glance with Garrett. Both men had seen her this way before. Practical. Cold. The kind of diver who would rather trust her own instincts than any authority's orders. Before any of them could speak further, a woman in a grey pantsuit strode toward them. Her hair was tied in a severe bun, her heels sinking into the mud without slowing her pace. Have you signed in? She asked Mark directly, her voice firm, commanding. Yes, but 12 hours, she cut in. That's all the time you have. Mark frowned. 12 hours for what? The woman ignored him. She turned to a nearby USGS official, her words low but sharp. He wants to protect his ownership. No one else can know about this. Ownership. Mark's gut tightened. Ownership of what? His unease thickened as his eyes drifted past her. The floodlights lit the valley floor, and where a lake once had been, now there was nothing but cracked mud. The drained basin stretched wide, jagged fissures running through it like scars, and at the center, still filled with black water, was a narrow, yawning hole. It was too deep, too dark, like an eye, watching. Mark's skin prickled. Garrett broke the silence with a low voice. I don't like this place. Nora fastened the last strap of her tank and pulled down her mask, her voice muffled but steady. Then let's make it quick. Mark followed their gaze to the black water. The hole waited, and though he didn't know why, he felt certain. Whatever was down there wasn't meant to be found. Chapter 3. Preparation amid chaos. The floodlights painted the drained lake bed in stark, artificial daylight. Every particle of dust in the air shimmered like ash, suspended in the cold breath of the valley. The noise never stopped. Engines thrummed, pumps groaned, and voices barked orders into radios. It was chaos without rhythm, a machine tearing itself apart from within. Mark, Garrett, and Nora stood at the edge of the hole, their shadows stretching long across the cracked mud. They looked less like divers preparing for a mission, and more like soldiers waiting for orders that never came. Garrett grumbled beneath his breath, his hands adjusting the straps of his harness. No briefing, no maps, no readings. They don't have time for a damn meeting, but they've got time to shine lights bright enough to blind us. Mark checked the dive light attached to his helmet, flicking it on and off, on and off. The beam was narrow, swallowed by the darkness of the hole, only a few meters away. We can't dive blind. What's the visibility down there? Water temperature, current flow? No one answered. A tall man in a USGS jacket walked past, nose buried in a tablet, as though the divers weren't even standing there. A woman in a hazmat suit chased after a gull that had landed near the fissure, shooing it away like it carried the plague. The stench of dead fish clung to the air, heavy and sour, and every gust of wind carried it into Mark's throat. Nora, meticulous as ever, adjusted the GPS band on her wrist. Her face was taut, eyes locked on the black water. "They want us to dive blind," she muttered, voice low but steady. "No maps, no sonar, no data. Just drop in and obey." Mark's jaw tightened. That's insane. No one dives blind into a collapse zone. Before he could say more, the woman in the grey suit appeared again. She moved with sharp precision, heels clicking against cracked earth, her gaze cutting through the three divers as though they were obstacles, not people. "Are you ready?" she asked. Nora stiffened. "We need information before we can dive safely. Depth readings, currents, gas composition." The woman's jaw clenched. "I don't care about your safety. You've signed. Your equipment works. That's all that matters." She leaned in, her voice dropping low. "Dangerous. Do what's required, or you lose everything." Her words hit like a slap of cold water. Lose everything. Mark felt the weight of Belize pressing against him again, that buried past dragged back into the light. His chest tightened. These weren't negotiable orders. This was leverage. The woman turned and strode away, leaving only the echo of her words behind. Garrett spat into the dirt. "What the hell kind of rescue job is this?" Mark didn't answer. His eyes drifted back to the water. Dead fish floated on the surface, bellies up, their white eyes staring blankly at the floodlights. Seagulls circled overhead, shrieking, their cries eerily like laughter. Something about the hole unnerved him in a way he couldn't put into words. It wasn't just water down there. It was presence. Nora placed a hand briefly on Mark's arm, her touch firm, grounding. "Remember, 20 minutes, no longer. 25 with depressurization, no matter what they tell us." Her eyes locked onto his, sharp and unyielding. "Don't trust them. Trust your instincts." Mark nodded once. They began their final checks. Dry suits sealed, tanks secured, guideline spools clipped to their harnesses, comms tested, though already static hummed through the earpieces. Mark tightened the strap of his mask and glanced at Garrett. who gave him a grim nod. Nora was already moving toward the lip of the hole, every step deliberate, precise. Behind them, the chaos of the encampment blurred into background noise. Engines, shouting, floodlights, it all faded until only the black water existed. Garrett's voice was low, steady. "Let's do it." The three of them approached in single file, their silhouettes stark against the brilliance of the floodlights. The edge crumbled beneath their boots as they reached the rim. Mark paused. His reflection stared back from the black surface, warped and ghost-like. The water seemed to swallow light, absorbing it instead of reflecting it. He took a long breath, tasting diesel, mud, and fear. Then, without another word, he leaned forward and plunged in. The water closed over him like a coffin lid. Silence, darkness, cold. The world above was gone. Chapter 4. The First Dive. The world above vanished the instant the water swallowed him. Sound, light, warmth, gone. Mark plunged into a realm of liquid blackness, where the floodlights above could not reach, and every movement felt muted, as though the water itself were alive and pressing against him. The cold struck first, seeping past the seal of his dry suit, biting at his skin like ice needles. His regulator hissed with each breath, the only rhythm anchoring him against the silence. He flicked on his helmet light. The beam cut a pale tunnel through the murk, but it barely pushed more than a few feet ahead. Mud and debris drifted everywhere, swirling like ash in a storm. The recent geological shift had churned the water into a soupy haze, thick with silt. Garrett's light appeared to his left, steady, deliberate. Nora's to his right, sharp and searching. The three of them descended slowly, formation tight, hands on their guideline spools. Already their comms hissed with static. Mark tapped his earpiece, but it was no use. The deeper they went, the more the surface dissolved into memory. The bottom came into view at last. A graveyard of drowned trees, their limbs twisted into grotesque silhouettes, half buried in sediment. Rocks lay scattered, jagged and unnatural, as though the earth itself had been torn open. Garrett signaled. "Stop." His beam angled forward. Mark followed the light, then froze. Ahead of them, a jagged black mouth yawned open in the lake bed. A cavern. Its edges were sharp, crystalline, refracting the divers' lights into fractured spectral rainbows. The entrance was enormous, at least 50 feet across, a wound in the earth waiting to swallow them whole. Mark's stomach tightened. They hadn't been briefed on caves. They weren't supposed to be here. But the call, the orders, they had led them directly to this. Garrett signaled again. Proceed. Reluctantly, they entered. Inside, the temperature dropped further, unnaturally cold. The crystalline walls shimmered under their lamps, beautiful and alien, like a cathedral carved by no human hand. Water pressure thickened with each foot, pressing on Mark's chest, making his breath shorter, tighter. Something dripped from the ceiling in slow, viscous streams, a translucent goo that oozed into the water, drifting like smoke. Nora paused, carefully filling a vial with the substance, her brow furrowed behind her mask. She pointed to it, then made the signal. Unknown. Dangerous. Garrett, curious, chipped at the wall with a small chisel, prying loose a shard of glittering quartz. He tucked it into a pouch, but when his light struck the fragment, the reflections seemed wrong, too sharp, too many angles, as if the stone itself was watching. Mark's pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed this place had been sealed for millennia, untouched, until now. Their comms crackled suddenly, a distorted burst of static, then a voice, faint but unmistakable. The woman in the grey suit. Go deeper. deeper. Then silence. Mark's throat tightened. They were already pushing limits, too far without data. Still, they obeyed. The tunnels twisted into a labyrinth. They laid down line as they went, careful, methodical, but the sense of direction dissolved quickly. Pressure mounted, light bent strangely in the crystalline walls, and in the suffocating silence Mark began to feel something else. A presence. It wasn't sight. It wasn't sound. It was the primal certainty that something ancient was here with them, coiled in the dark. They pressed on until the cavern narrowed into a chamber no bigger than a car. Nora checked her wrist timer. 20 minutes had passed. She raised one finger. Time. Reluctantly, they began to turn back. Mark cast one last glance into the chamber. In the shifting haze, he thought he saw movement, something pale slipping back into the fissures. Too fast, too smooth. His light caught nothing. They started their slow ascent. The water thickened, currents swirling, dragging silt into choking clouds. Mark's chest grew tight, not just from the pressure, but from fear gnawing at the edge of his control. He tried to push the thought away. Just a trick of the light, just nerves. But deep inside, he knew they weren't alone down here. Chapter 5. The catastrophe. Relief stirred in Mark's chest as Nora signaled time. They had made their mark, collected their samples, survived the first leg. The black tunnels behind them had been tight, suffocating, but now the faint pull of the guideline pointed the way home. Upward, toward air. He exhaled slowly, bubbles spiraling above him like fleeting silver coins. Just a few more minutes, and the suffocating weight of the cavern would be behind them. Then the comms screamed. Not words, just a shriek, high-pitched, metallic, so loud it stabbed through his skull. Mark clutched his helmet in agony, the sound cutting nerves like razor wire. Garrett jerked sideways. Nora froze, their light stuttering wildly, and then the earth moved. It wasn't a gentle tremor. It was violence, sudden and overwhelming. The cavern shuddered like the belly of some gigantic beast, a deep groan rolling through the stone. Fractures split the crystalline walls, shards glittering as they broke loose. Chunks of rock the size of cars tore free, tumbling weightlessly through the water. Mark's heart slammed into his ribs. His light whipped around, catching Nora just as a slab crashed down. She twisted, too late. The stone pinned her leg against the cave floor with bone-snapping force. Her regulator hissed furiously, bubbles erupting around her. She flailed. Her line snapped taut, then went slack. Mark's breath caught in his throat. No. He darted forward, but Garrett was faster. The old diver surged toward Nora, straining against the weight of the slab, bubbles bursting in furious jets. His glove slipped on the crystal-slick surface. Another crack boomed overhead, more rocks shearing loose. Mark's body jolted as a surge of current slammed into him. Water turned wild, thrashing him against jagged stone. His mask rattled, his legs smashed against rock, white-hot pain shooting up his spine. Something shifted inside his ankle with a sickening pop. He screamed into his regulator, bubbles roaring from his mouthpiece. The cavern became chaos. Light beams whipped in every direction, slicing through clouds of silt. The water thickened with blood, mud, and the glitter of fractured crystal. Mark's vision blurred. He caught one last glimpse of Nora's light flickering, then vanishing into blackness. His gut twisted. Gone. She's gone. Then hands grabbed him. Garrett. His mask cracked, blood streaming from a gash across his forehead, but his eyes were fierce, steady. He jammed Mark's dislodged air hose back into place, forcing oxygen into his lungs. His other hand made rapid, desperate signals. Tunnel collapse. Nora, gone. Go. Mark shook his head violently, panic flooding him, but Garrett shoved him hard toward the guideline. The old man's own light flickered, sputtered, then died. Only Mark's lamp cut the dark now, quivering in the swirling maelstrom. A thunderous groan rolled through the cave as another wall split open. Mark kicked, pain lancing through his twisted foot, forcing himself upward, dragging against the current. Garrett was still there, behind him, his silhouette framed by a falling stone. Then the black water erupted. Something pale slithered through the cracks, long, impossibly thin, jointed like bone. Fingers, claws. They darted faster than sight, wrapping around Garrett's torso. Mark's scream tore through his regulator as he watched the thing yank Garrett backward into the collapse. The old diver's light winked out, swallowed by shadow. Mark was alone. The cave roared around him, every groan of the earth a death sentence. He fought the current, his lungs burning, his legs screaming with each kick. Blood clouded the water behind him. He could barely see, barely think, just the primal drive up, surface, survive. But deep inside, beneath the panic and pain, one realization sank in, heavier than stone. They had woken something, and it wasn't going back to sleep. Chapter 6. Encounter with the Unknown. The current finally eased, spitting Mark into a narrow tunnel. His body tumbled against jagged stone, pain flaring through his dislocated foot. He clawed for the rock, anchored himself, and forced a breath through clenched teeth. Garrett's gone. The thought hit like a weight in his chest. He wanted to scream, to curse, to go back, but there was no back. Only a collapsing tomb behind him and darkness pressing from all sides. He checked his gauges. Oxygen low, too low. His pulse thundered in his ears. Panic clawed at the edges of his mind, demanding to take over. He shoved it down, one step at a time. Follow the current, find the way out. The water grew colder. His light quivered over the tunnel walls, catching strange patterns in the stone. Spirals, grooves, too symmetrical to be natural, as though something had carved them eons ago. Then he saw it. At first, he thought it was just movement in the silt. But no, the shapes were too defined. A school of small, darting fish, 4 inches long, translucent bodies glowing faintly blue. Their heads were smooth, eyeless, their mouths sharp, beak-like. They flitted past him with unnatural speed, then vanished into cracks in the rock. Mark's skin crawled. These weren't creatures of any lake he'd ever known. He pushed forward, his light sweeping ahead. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber. He almost sagged with relief. Space, at last. But the relief died instantly. The water shifted. Not a current, a pulse. Something moved. It wasn't sound he heard. Not really. It was a pressure in the water, a vibration that thrummed against his bones, deep, resonant, like the lowest note of an organ echoing through his chest. It made his vision swim, his heart stutter. Mark froze, his body instinctively shrinking against the stone wall. His lamp quivered in his hand. Then, something reached out of the darkness, an arm, long, impossibly thin, pale as bone, its joints bent wrong. Too many angles, too many knuckles. At its end, not fingers but tapered spines, needle-like, clicking faintly as they flexed. The arm brushed past him, missing by inches. The water carried its chill, colder than ice, a cold that burned. Mark's lungs seized. He clamped his mouthpiece tighter, forcing himself not to gasp. His light darted across the chamber and landed on more of it. A shape, massive, half seen through the murk. A torso, number 2 long, 2 segmented, like a centipede made of bone and translucent flesh. The glow of tiny, eyeless fish shimmered across its body, illuminating hollow sockets where eyes should be. It wasn't looking at him, not yet. Mark pressed himself against the wall, every nerve screaming. He wanted to move. He wanted to run. But one wrong kick, one wrong bubble, and that thing would know. The vibration in the water deepened, thrumming like a song too low for human ears. Mark's teeth rattled. His chest ached. He realized with sickening clarity this was communication. The creature was singing. A jagged memory flared. The shriek in their comms. It hadn't been static. It had been this. His tank beeped. Oxygen critical. The sound was tiny, faint, but in the crushing silence, it was deafening. The creature turned. The sockets in its skull flared with a faint, blue glow, as though awakening. Its head, or what passed for one, tilted. The spined arm twitched, stretching toward the sound. Mark's instinct screamed, "Run!" He kicked off the wall, pain searing up his leg, and shot toward a narrow crevice at the chamber's edge. The water exploded behind him, a surge of force as the creature lunged. Stone groaned. His lamp beam swung wildly, catching flashes of bone, sinew, and hollow sockets before plunging back into blackness. He forced himself through the crevice, suit tearing on jagged rock, leaving a streak of blood. The tunnel constricted, scraping his shoulders, but he pushed harder, lungs burning, chest screaming. Behind him, claws scraped against stone. Slow, relentless. It was following. Chapter 7. Desperate escape. The tunnel closed around him like a coffin. Sharp stones scraped his shoulders, snagging at his torn suit. Each kick of his twisted foot sent daggers of pain ripping up his leg, but he forced it to move. The water was shallow here, the current sluggish, but behind him he could hear it. A rasping drag, metal on stone, or claws. The sound echoed, distorted by the water, but it was constant, close, too close. Mark's breaths came in ragged bursts, regulator hissing louder than the roar in his ears. His oxygen gauge dipped into the red. Minutes. That's all I have left. He pressed forward, hands scraping along the rock to pull himself, half swimming, half crawling. The tunnel widened, suddenly spilling him into another chamber, larger but low-ceilinged, water rising only to his chest. He gasped, breaking the surface, tearing his regulator free. The air was thick, sweet, sickly, like rotting fruit. Each breath made his stomach lurch. Still, it was air, his first unfiltered lungful in hours. He coughed hard, clutching the edge of the rock. His hands shook, his body ached. I can't stop, not here. Then he heard it again. Scrape, scrape, the sound of something dragging itself across the stone, pulling closer. Mark's heart hammered. He turned his headlamp toward the tunnel he had just squeezed through. The beam lit only black water, broken by drifting strands of translucent slime. But the sound grew louder, scraping and clicking, until it reverberated through the chamber like a second heartbeat. It knows I'm here. He forced himself to move, dragging his body across the ankle-deep water, clawing for another exit. The cavern floor was jagged, every motion slicing into his palms, but he pushed on. Then, something metallic brushed his hand. He froze. Slowly he reached down, fingers closing around it. Cold steel, a cylinder. He pulled it free and nearly sobbed with relief. An air tank, Garrett's spare. Hope surged, then faltered. The regulator was cracked, dented, but it still hissed when he twisted the valve. Barely functional. Enough for a few more breaths. Mark slung it across his shoulder, securing it as best he could. The thought of Garrett slammed into him, bitter and raw, but he pushed it down. Not now, not here. Survive first, grieve later. The rasping scrape drew closer, and now he could hear something else. A low croak, guttural and wet, vibrating through the stone, followed by a crunch, a tearing sound, a gnawing. Mark's stomach lurched. He didn't need to see it to know. The thing was feeding on Garrett. His vision blurred with rage, grief, terror. He couldn't tell. He jammed the regulator into his mouth and shoved forward, plunging into another narrow passage. The water rose again, swallowing him whole. His lamp cut across the tunnel, lighting jagged walls slick with the same translucent ooze. The scraping stopped. Silence. Then, movement. Faster than before. The water itself seemed to convulse, pressure shifting around him. His chest seized as if the whole cavern were breathing. He kicked harder, lungs screaming, his injured foot dragging uselessly. His hand slammed against an outcropping of rock, skin splitting, blood fanning into the water. The taste of iron filled his mouth even through the regulator. The tunnel opened again, another chamber, larger but still sealed. Now the water barely brushed his waist. He stumbled, crawling forward on hands and knees. The light swung wildly, shadows jerking across the walls, and then he froze. A shadow loomed ahead, massive, blocking the exit. It wasn't fully visible, only fragments caught in the weak beam, pale ridges like exposed ribs, flesh stretched thin, nearly translucent, limbs jointed at wrong angles, spines clicking as they flexed, its head tilted, sockets glowing faintly blue, locking onto him. Mark's breath hitched. The regulator hissed. The creature leaned closer. The sound returned, not the croak, not the scrape, but the deep vibration thrumming through the water, through his bones, through his teeth. A song, older than anything human. Mark's body screamed at him to collapse, to surrender, but instinct roared louder. Move, run, live. He shoved himself sideways, dragging his broken body into another fissure, stone tearing at his suit, at his skin. The creature's spined arm lashed out, striking the rock where he had been seconds before. The impact shook the cavern, shards raining down like shattered glass. Mark crawled deeper. Heart thundering, the vibration of the creature's song chasing him, wrapping around him, drowning him. There was no plan, no strategy, only survival, and the growing certainty that whatever lived here had no intention of letting him leave. Chapter 8. Survival and Aftermath. Mark's lungs burned, every breath a ragged gulp through the battered regulator. His body was breaking down, ankle ruined, arms trembling, blood seeping into the water, but the instinct to live forced him forward. The fissure twisted violently, scraping his shoulders raw as he clawed through. Behind him, the cavern pulsed with movement, the song deepening. The water quivered with each note, the frequency rattling his teeth, making his vision swim. It wasn't sound anymore. It was inside him. The passage spat him into a cavern half filled with water. He collapsed onto the slick stone, gasping, chest heaving. The air here was stale, thick with the same sweet, rotting scent. He gagged but forced himself to breathe. The scraping returned, closer. He scrambled forward, dragging his twisted foot, palms raw and bleeding. His headlamp flickered, shadows leaping across the walls. His fingers brushed smooth metal, a panel embedded into the rock, not natural, human. He clawed at it with shaking hands. It gave slightly, a seam splitting. He slammed his fist again and again until the panel cracked open. A pale glow seeped through, sterile and artificial. Hope flared like fire in his chest, an exit, a way out. But then the cavern behind him stirred. The creature entered. Its body unfolded like a nightmare from the fissure. Limbs clicking, translucent flesh stretching across an impossible frame. Its spined arms scraped along the walls, sending sparks into the dark. The sockets in its skull glowed faintly, fixed on him. The song deepened into a thunderous resonance that shook the stone. Mark clutched his head, agony piercing through his skull. Blood trickled from his nose. His body begged him to give in, to collapse into the song. but survival screamed louder. With a roar of desperation, he slammed his shoulder into the metal panel. It tore open, spilling him into a narrow maintenance tunnel lined with steel. Cold air rushed against his face, burning his lungs. He scrambled forward on hands and knees, leaving smears of blood across the floor. Behind him, the cavern shuddered as the creature struck the opening. Its spined arm lashed through the gap, scraping metal, gouging deep scars into the steel. The sound shrieked like tearing glass, echoing down the corridor. Mark crawled faster, dragging himself toward a faint light ahead. His foot caught, his body buckled, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The light grew brighter, a hatch. He slammed into it with his shoulder clawing at the wheel. His muscles screamed, the hatch groaned open, and hands reached down from above. Human hands. Got him! He was hauled upward, torn gear spilling off him, blood streaking down his arms and face. His vision blurred, the world spinning, but he caught fragments, floodlights, uniforms, stretchers, voices barking orders. He collapsed on a concrete platform, coughing violently, gasping air like it was the first breath of his life. The roar of the pumps returned, the shouts of people, the sterile floodlights glaring into his eyes. For one breathless moment he thought he was safe. Then his gaze fell sideways. On a stretcher, pale and shaking, lay Nora, alive. One leg gone, wrapped in heavy bandages, her eyes locked on his, wide, terrified. Mark's relief shattered, because if Nora was alive, then Garrett. He choked, a sob clawing at his throat. Voices swirled around him, orders barked, medical hands grabbing at his body. But over it all, above the chaos, he heard it, faint, so faint he thought it was in his head. The song, low, resonant, carrying up from the hole. It hadn't been left behind. It was still singing. Chapter 9. The Aftermath and the Cover-Up. Bright light seared his eyes. Mark blinked, groaning, his vision swimming in and out of focus. For a moment, he thought he was still in the cavern, trapped in some hallucination. But the smell was different here. Antiseptic, sterile. He was in a facility underground, steel walls, fluorescent lights, the hiss of ventilators and the steady beeping of monitors. He lay on a gurney, stripped of his dive gear, wrapped in coarse grey blankets. Every inch of his body ached. His foot was bound tight, his skin laced with bandages. Movement caught his eye. Across the room, Nora lay on another bed. She was awake, her face pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her leg, what was left of it, was elevated, swaddled in layers of gauze. She met his gaze, and for a moment her icy composure cracked. Her eyes shimmered with something raw. They were alive, both of them, but Garrett. Mark's throat closed. He didn't need confirmation. He'd seen it. Garrett wasn't coming back. The door hissed open. The woman in the grey suit stepped inside. Her hair was still bound tight, her heels clicking against the steel floor. She carried no clipboard, no files, just authority radiating from her like static. "You survived," she said simply, her eyes sweeping over Mark, then Nora. "That's more than most." Mark pushed himself upright despite the pain, rage spiking in his chest. What the hell was that thing? What did you send us into? Her expression didn't change, not even a flicker. She walked closer, hands folded neatly in front of her. "You were contracted to dive. You dove. You returned. That is the extent of your concern." Mark barked a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Bullshit. That wasn't a rescue mission. That was a trap." He pointed at Nora, voice breaking. "She lost her leg. Garrett's dead. And you." Her gaze cut through him like a blade. Garrett made his choice. The words hit like ice water. Cold. Final. Mark clenched his fist, but Nora's voice broke in, low, steady despite her pain. Why us? Finally, the woman smiled, thin, calculated, because you are skilled, disposable, and you each carry secrets you would rather keep buried, secrets that make you compliant. Mark's blood froze. Belize, his past, she knew. The woman placed a folder on the table beside him. You will both sign these. Mark stared. Inside were contracts, non-disclosure agreements, 10 years of silence, clauses that stripped them of liability, of rights, of any shred of freedom to speak about what had happened. If you break this agreement, she continued, voice as smooth as glass, everything you value will be destroyed. Your careers, your families, your reputations. You will lose everything. Do you understand? Mark's hands trembled. Rage boiled in his chest, but his body betrayed him. Broken, exhausted, haunted. He looked at Nora. She was staring at the ceiling, her jaw tight, tears brimming in her eyes. Slowly, with shaking hands, she reached for a pen. Mark's heart twisted. He wanted to fight. He wanted to scream. But the image of Garrett's death, the song of the creature, the hollow sockets glowing in the dark, those memories chained him. And beneath it all, the truth. If they could drag Belize into the light, they could end him with a whisper. His hand hovered. Then, with a strangled breath, he signed. The woman in grey closed the folder, her smile sharp. Good. The Hatchet Corporation thanks you for your cooperation. Hatchet. Mark's stomach knotted at the name. As she turned to leave, Mark forced out one last question. His voice cracked, but he didn't care. What was it? The woman paused at the door. She didn't turn back. Something old, she said. Something that belongs to us now. The door hissed shut. Silence pressed in, heavy and suffocating. Mark lay back, staring at the ceiling. The fluorescent light hummed above him, but in the quiet of his own mind, he could still hear it. The song. Low, resonant, ancient. And he knew with a certainty that chilled his bones, signing that paper hadn't saved him. It had only ensured that the nightmare would never end. Chapter 10. The song still echoes. Weeks passed. Mark told himself he was healing. He sat in a hospital bed, then a physical therapy chair, then finally in his own apartment. His body mended in increments. Stitches dissolved, bruises faded, bones knit back together. But the pain never left. His foot remained a dull throb, a constant reminder of the cave's embrace. He told himself he was free. The Hatchet Corporation paid his bills, discreet and efficient. His gear was gone, confiscated. His bank account suddenly heavier. Nora had disappeared into rehabilitation, relocated under corporate medical care. They had survived. That was enough. But late at night, when the world was quiet, Mark knew the truth. He was not healing. He was not free, because the song had followed him. At first it was faint, like the ghost of a memory. He would lie in bed and feel a vibration deep in his ribs, so soft he thought it was his own heartbeat. But then it grew louder, surfacing in the stillness between breaths. A low resonance, a single, endless note, ancient, patient, calling. He stopped sleeping. Coffee cups littered his apartment. He covered the mirrors, because sometimes he thought he saw movement reflected in them. Something pale, something jointed. He drowned himself in television, in noise, in anything to drown out the hum. Nothing worked. One night, he snapped. He drove. Miles vanished beneath the tires of his truck as he returned to Greenbrier Valley. The highway stretched, black and empty. Trees closing in like a corridor. At dawn, he reached the perimeter. Fences crowned with razor wire. Warning signs, guards in grey. The lake bed was gone, filled, sealed. The floodlights dismantled, the pumps removed. To anyone else, it looked ordinary again, a quiet stretch of wilderness. But Mark knew better. He stood at the fence, hands gripping the cold steel, staring at the soil that hid the hole. His ears throbbed with the song. Louder now, closer. It wasn't sealed. It wasn't gone. It was waiting. He staggered back, chest heaving, the truth crashing into him like a tidal wave. The cave hadn't chosen randomly. The call hadn't been chance. He had been marked. His phone buzzed in his pocket. His stomach clenched. He pulled it free and the screen lit with a number. No area code, no name, just digits. The same digits. His hands shook as he answered. The voice that slid through the line was flat, toneless, mechanical. "Mark Henderson," it said. "It's time." The line went dead. Mark stood frozen, the phone slipping from his fingers into the dirt. The forest was silent around him, the air still. And then, faint, carried on the morning wind. The song. Low, resonant, endless. It wasn't an echo, it wasn't a memory, it was a summons.